New Guinea, 1943. The air hung heavy with burned oil and wet earth. A convoy of Type 4 compact cargo trucks, Toyota AK10s, lay scattered across a half-flooded road, their wheels buried to the hubs in chocolate-colored mud. Lieutenant Colonel Hayashi stood in silence. Rain clung to his field glasses. Behind him, soldiers moved without speaking, dragging crates that contained nothing useful anymore. Every truck was intact, every engine ready, every tank dry. He opened a worn notebook and wrote, hands shaking slightly, operational strength, 20%, cause, fuel starvation. A mechanic crouched beside a motionless vehicle, wiping a spotless headlight as though polishing a relic. Around them the jungle steamed, and the sound of distant artillery was swallowed by rain. Hayashi stared at the row of perfect machines. They were the pride of Japanese engineering, 2,100 pounds of precision, geometry, and faith in metal. Yet they were monuments now, not weapons. He whispered to no one, "We built perfection, and it starved to death." The rain eased until only a thin mist remained. It clung to every surface, rifles, helmets, and the silent bodies of machines that once roared like tigers. An AK-10 stood nearest to Hayashi, its olive-drab skin still glistening under the gray light. It looked ready for war, ready for anything but reality. Its tires were deflated, the canvas roof sagged under the weight of water, and the fuel gauge sat motionless at zero. The colonel placed a hand on the hood. The metal was cool, perfect, lifeless. He could almost feel the hands of the men who had built it, engineers in white coats thousands of miles away, believing their precision could bend fate itself. A sergeant broke the silence. His voice was half whisper, half confession. "Sir, these things run beautifully when they run, but beauty won't move a wheel without gasoline." Hayashi didn't answer. He listened instead, the way a man listens for a heartbeat that isn't there. The jungle had gone still. Even the cicadas had stopped. In that quiet he heard the faint hiss of vapor escaping from an empty tank like the sigh of a dying machine. That sound carried more truth than any report he could ever write. They had won the argument of design and lost the war of supply. Hayashi turned away, rain dripping from his cap brim. The jungle, indifferent and eternal, swallowed the trucks behind a curtain of mist. He almost laughed. Almost. A gust rolled down from the ridge, stirring the jungle canopy. One of the AK-10 doors, unlatched, swung open with a hollow clank, then slammed shut again. The echo lingered through the valley like a gunshot at a funeral. Lieutenant Colonel Hayashi looked back once more. A single Toyota badge caked with mud caught a glint of light. For a heartbeat it shimmered, half gold, half rust. The emblem of a dream, too finely built to survive its own perfection. He rubbed the mud from his hand and stared at the brown streak across his palm. "We mastered the details," he murmured, "but forgot the distance." The clouds parted just long enough for a thin shaft of sun to strike the stalled convoy. In that light, the trucks looked almost proud again, like soldiers waiting for orders that would never come. Hayashi blinked against the glare. The sound of the jungle began to fade. The drizzle became bright daylight. Smoke thinned into warm air. The camera of memory turned backward to a hangar in the Philippines 2 years earlier. The air smelled of gasoline and confidence. Laughter echoed between steel beams. "To understand why this perfect machine sits idle," Hayashi's voice carried into the past, "we must return to the moment of our greatest arrogance." December 10th, 1941. Clark Field. The war had just begun, and so had the mistake. Clark Field. December 10th, 1941. The tropical light fell through broken skylights in pale ladders, painting the concrete with gold and dust. American tool chests lay kicked open, wrenches scattered like bones. A B-17 tail fin loomed outside the hangar mouth, a silent cathedral of rivets and aluminum. Chief Engineer Yamamoto Kenji walked in with his board of men, Watanabe, Sato, Honda, veterans of the Luke Kwan's proud motor works. They carried calipers and notebooks the way officers carry sabers. Precision was their creed, perfection their uniform. Someone whistled low. The echo traveled along the rafters. The air smelled of gasoline and burnt paint. It felt like a laboratory after the experiment had exploded. And there it was, squatting beneath a torn canvas tarp, an American Bantam reconnaissance car, olive drab and unassuming, with flat fenders and a simple grille like a farm gate. Yamamoto's lip curled. So this is the miracle. Watanabe tugged the tarp free. Dust lifted in a small halo and drifted toward the light. They circled the machine like surgeons judging a cheap toy. Fingers tapped at the sheet metal, knuckles making that thin, tinny note. No elegant crown on the fender, only a bent plate, Sato said. A box on wheels, another man chuckled. A child's cart painted for war. Yamamoto opened the hood. The Continental four-cylinder sat plain and honest. Wires neat but unspectacular. A 6-volt heart with nothing to boast about. 48 horsepower, he announced, tone dry as chalk. Our standard army truck hauls twice this mass with the same figure. Laughter rose, not cruel exactly, but confident. The laugh of men who know their trade and see an amateur's trick. Watanabe wrapped the side panel with the edge of a caliper. 1 6/10 millimeters, if that, he said. Heads nodded, pleased with the diagnosis. A young draftsman traced the windshield frame. Folds at the hinges, he observed, puzzled. To lie flat? Parade theatrics, boom, someone answered. A farmer's convenience. The hangar felt warm with certainty. Outside, a breeze pushed palm shadows across the tarmac like slow black waves. In the distance, a fuel fire snapped and hissed. Yamamoto closed the hood with a palm laid flat, as if blessing a patient before declaring death. Gentlemen, he said, voice carrying along the steel, this is everything wrong with American mass production. He gestured to the flat panels, the plain rivet lines, the absence of ornate stampings that Japanese craftsmen wore like medals. They have sacrificed durability for speed, intricacy for simplicity, excellence for the lowest common tool. He paced along the frame, heel clicked steady on concrete. On proper service in mountains or jungle, this would not survive a week. Moisture will creep into the harness. Bearings will show their cheapness. The body will flex like a washtub. Pens scratched approval. The verdict felt good. Right. The world had order again. Superior craft above crude convenience. Watanabe smiled tightly. Shall I draft the finding? Yamamoto nodded once. The case seemed closed. A runner appeared at the hangar mouth, out of breath, sleeves dusty. He held a flimsy envelope with the seal from Tokyo. Operational directive, he said, bowing. Immediate. Yamamoto slit the paper with a thumbnail and read. The words were simple, almost indifferent to pride. All captured equipment will undergo complete operational testing. No exceptions. No exceptions. The phrase hung in the warm air like a gavel strike. The laughter faded to a murmur. Even the fire outside seemed to hush, as though listening. Watanabe shifted his weight. Sir, the drivetrain appears to include a part-time four-wheel system. Yamamoto did not look up. We will test it, he said, fully. Then we will document the inevitable failure. He snapped the clipboard shut. Prepare a course with proper terrain. Ruts, slope, soft ground. Nothing theatrical. Honda nodded. At dawn, he replied. We will finish by noon. The men began to move with the crispness of certainty. Calipers went back into pockets. A mechanic found the ignition key in a canvas pouch, held it up, then tucked it away for morning like a talisman of someone else's superstition. Sunlight shifted across the floor in a slow rectangle. Dust glittered in the beam, then faded as a cloud passed. The Bantam sat quietly, the way an animal sits when it knows something the hunter does not. Yamamoto paused at the threshold and glanced back. For a breath, he felt, what was it? Hesitation. He almost laughed. Almost. Formality, he said under his breath, and stepped into the heat. Clark Field exhaled into evening. Crickets took the field where engines used to sing. Lanterns swung in the breeze along the hangar row, small moons stitched to the dark with wire. Inside, the American vehicle waited, hood latched, tires dusty, windshield catching a slice of moonlight through the broken roof. In shadow, its simple geometry looked purposeful. Watanabe returned alone to check the fuel line. Habit. Pride. He ran a fingertip along the transfer case lever and frowned at its clean logic. Too easy, he muttered, as if simplicity were an insult. He closed his notebook and listened to the night. A sentry coughed. Somewhere a dog barked. The lantern flame fluttered and steadied. In a few hours, the key would turn. In a few minutes more, the first assumption would crack. No one planned for that. No one ever does. Before sunrise, the air turned cool, almost kind. Men gathered at the edge of the test ground, officers with clipboards, mechanics with sleeves rolled, soldiers curious for a show. The course was honest, a rut-carved incline, a patch of waterlogged clay, a lane of broken coral rock. Nothing theatrical, nothing merciful. Yamamoto accepted the key without ceremony. The small machine waited, squat and calm, like a boxer who has learned not to talk before the bell. "Begin at your convenience," an adjutant said. Watanabe slid behind the wheel, hand resting on the shifter, as if taking the pulse of a patient. He shot Yamamoto a look, confident, faintly amused. The chief engineer answered with a nod. "Let us be done with it," he said. The key turned. The morning held its breath, and the laughter, though no one knew it yet, was already running out of time. Dawn. Mist lifted off Clark Field in pale ribbons. The Bantam sat on the edge of the test ground, its olive paint beaded with dew. Watanabe twisted the key. A brief cough. Then a smooth, almost civilized idle. No grinding, no smoke. The note of the Continental four-cylinder was steady, confident, domestic. Wrong. Yamamoto frowned. Too light, too soft, he muttered. He signaled to proceed. The clutch engaged like silk. The vehicle rolled forward without effort, its wheels biting the wet soil. Men who expected stalling exchanged quick glances. In the first 50 yards, the Bantam moved with an agility none of them had ever seen in a military truck. The laughter, held in their throats, began to thin. Watanabe guided the car toward the slope, a rut-cut incline churned by monsoon rain. Engaging the transfer lever took a single motion. The drivetrain locked with a muted click. The Bantam climbed. No wheel spin, no protest. At the crest, Watanabe grinned despite himself. "Sir, it holds traction." Yamamoto said nothing. His pencil hung motionless above the clipboard. They descended into a patch of waterlogged clay, where heavier trucks had sunk to their axles the day before. The Jeep eased through, power shifting almost instinctively from one wheel to another. Every rotation seemed to announce the same heresy. Lightness could be strength. Then, deliberately, Watanabe steered into a trap between two rocks. The left rear wheel jammed hard. They waited for failure. Yamamoto climbed out, lips pressed thin. "Very well. Recover it." Watanabe laughed once, nervous, then serious. He braced himself behind the bumper. "Sir, help me." Together they lifted. Two men, no tools. The tail rose, the car shifted, and gravity finished the job. The Bantam was free. The silence that followed was heavier than any explosion. Somewhere a bird cried. Someone whispered, "Impossible." Yamamoto finally spoke, voice low, almost reverent. "No, not impossible. American." Back at the hangar, they took measurements with trembling precision. Ground clearance, 8 1/4 inches, two higher than any Japanese service truck. Turning radius, 17 1/2 feet, nearly 10 shorter. Weight-to-power ratio, 42 pounds per horsepower, almost half their own machines. Yamamoto stared at the figures. They mocked every rule he had trusted. He reached for the field radio, thumb hesitating on the transmit key, then pressed it. "Sir, we need to talk. The American vehicle, it works." Across the compound, the men who heard that sentence exchanged looks that no one recorded, because pride rarely writes reports. Morning turned to midday. The Bantam sat half dismantled on the hangar floor, its panels laid out like the bones of a puzzle. Engineer Sato measured the steel with calipers. 1.6 millimeters, he said softly, yet rigid. They traced the folds along the bodywork, strategic bends that replaced thickness with geometry. Every crease, every angle was intention hidden as simplicity. The windshield, folded flat in less than 30 seconds, drew laughter again, this time of disbelief. Watanabe ran the numbers. Height reduced from 68 inches to 50. 40% more vehicles per ship, he whispered. 40% fewer lives waiting for delivery. Even the transfer case mocked complexity. 68 pounds, two-speed, engageable while moving. Their own weighed twice as much and demanded a full stop. Sato looked up from the scattered bolts. "Fewer parts," he said. Far fewer. Honda counted aloud. Less than 10% of our assemblies. Yamamoto closed his notebook. The page was empty except for one line. They have eliminated complexity without losing strength. He exhaled, the sound almost a sigh of surrender. We have been building monument, Yosu, he said quietly. The Americans are building tools. The men stood among the pieces, speechless, surrounded by the geometry of defeat. Outside, the tropical sun burned white across the tarmac. It was still the same world, but now everything they believed about excellence had inverted. And somewhere deep inside Yamamoto Kenji, respect began to bloom, where contempt had died. Tokyo, December 22, 1941. The telegram reached Toyota's Como plant just before midnight, ink still wet, orders stamped with red urgency. Develop Japanese equivalent to captured American reconnaissance vehicle, highest priority. Chief Engineer Hanji Umehara read the message 3 times, as if repetition might soften its weight. Around him, the winter air of the factory was sharp with the smell of machine oil and unfinished steel. He gathered his team, men pulled from truck divisions, aircraft shops, even civilian sedans. We are to build a machine equal to the American Jeep, he said, but not in appearance. We must match its soul, not its shape. On the drafting tables lay the disassembled Bantam reports from Clark Field, photographs, hand-traced blueprints, and Yamamoto's now famous note. We have been building monuments. The Americans are building tools. Umehara tapped the words with his pencil. Then let us learn to build tools. Christmas Eve, 1941. The Como plant never slept. Sparks fell like orange snow as welders cut test frames through the night. Designer Nakamura flattened his palms against a sheet of steel only 1.6 millimeters thick. This feels like weakness, he murmured. Umehara shook his head. It feels like efficiency. They redrew every joint, every rib, using folds and angles instead of weight. The rule was simple. No unnecessary curve, no vanity of form. Drivetrain specialist Fuja studied the American transfer case until his fingers blackened with grease. 68 pounds, he noted, and still 2-speed. I can make it lighter. They worked under lanterns that smoked the rafters, fuel rationed to the last drop. Outside, snow drifted against shuttered windows. Inside, the birth of a philosophy took shape in chalk lines and cold air. Every decision became a vow. Lighter, faster, fewer parts, easier to repair. They were no longer copying a vehicle. They were reverse engineering humility. March 15, 1942. 91 days after the order, the prototype rolled from the workshop like a secret finally confessed. Its body was angular, unadorned, every panel folded with geometric precision. The engine, a 2.2-liter Type C, coughed once, then steadied. The sound echoed through the Como yard and froze every hand mid-motion. Umehara climbed into the driver's seat, his breath visible in the cold. Begin the trial, he said. The AK-10 leapt forward, gears meshing cleanly. It bounded across gravel, climbed a slope of snow and clay, splashed through a flooded ditch. Observers shouted over the roar. By the third run, even Yamamoto, now reassigned as liaison, was smiling. It exceeds expectations, he admitted. The engineers who had once doubted the thin steel now thumped the panels with their fists, laughing through exhaustion. Lightness had held, geometry had triumphed. The logbook recorded the moment in careful script. Prototype performance, satisfactory in all terrains. Domestic manufacture possible without retooling. Result, exceeded design target. For one bright morning, Japan's engineers felt they had caught the wind. Photographs were taken. Umehara beside the AK-10, collar turned up against the wind, grease streaked across his gloves. Behind him a banner read simply, Yonshiki Kogata Kamotsusha, Type 4 compact cargo truck. The machine gleamed in winter sun, every bolt an act of defiance. It was proof that Japan could answer America's challenge not with imitation, but intellect. At the press conference, Umehara spoke quietly. We have matched their capability while improving precision. The Jeep may be theirs. Efficiency now is ours. His words drew polite applause. Yet even in triumph, a shadow lingered. Logistics, steel quotas, the unspoken truth that production would depend on miracles of supply more than miracles of design. That night, as the factory lights dimmed, Umehara stood by the silent AK-10 and laid a hand on its hood. The metal was still warm. "Hold fast," he whispered. "You were born from respect." 1943. Across the Pacific, the arithmetic of war had taken on a voice of its own, an industrial drumbeat no army could silence. In Toledo, Ohio, the Willys Overland plant poured out 1,500 Jeeps a day. In Dearborn, the Ford Rouge complex added another 1,000. By the spring of 1943, the Allies counted 500,000 vehicles already shipped. Each engine that fired in Ohio meant another front supplied, another road conquered. Each day of American production equaled the total Japanese output for a month. And somewhere in Como, Japan, Hanji Umehara held the latest factory report in both hands, 47 units in September, 31 in October, 14 in November. The lines of ink looked less like numbers and more like a pulse fading. He whispered to no one, "In 8 hours, they build what takes us 2 years." The arithmetic was merciless. It was not battle that decided the AK-10's fate. It was mathematics. By late 1943, the miracle had run dry. Rubber convoys cut off. Copper diverted to the Navy. Steel allocations frozen for shipbuilding. On the Como assembly floor, chassis stood half-painted, missing tires, missing spark plugs, waiting for parts that would never arrive. Mechanics worked in silence, cannibalizing finished trucks to complete unfinished ones, an act of devotion disguised as sabotage. A supervisor filed the month's summary. 126 units awaiting materials, estimated completion unknown. Even the test grounds fell silent. The AK-10 could climb any hill, but none of them could reach the front. Lieutenant Colonel Hayashi, now redeployed to the Philippines, sent a field report that read like a eulogy. Vehicle performance, excellent. Operational utilization, below 20%. Cause, lack of fuel. In war, excellence without fuel was vanity. April 1944. The Como plant stood half-lit, machines cold, paint smell fading. Chief Engineer Yamamoto Kenji returned after months at the front. The gates creaked as he entered, echoes chasing his footsteps through empty bays. An unfinished AK-10 sat on the line, its frame bare, tires absent, a ghost of geometry and ambition. He placed a hand on the fender. The dust came away gray, not black. He smiled without humor. "We successfully decoded their engineering," he said softly. "We created manufacturing processes that matched their precision. But what we could not replicate," he looked up at the vacant rafters where lights once burned all night, "was their industrial ecosystem." The word echoed through steel and silence. It did not need to be repeated. Behind him, a single wrench slipped from a workbench and rang once on the concrete, sharp, final, like the punctuation of an empire. When the last AK-10 rolled out, March 27, 1944, the total stood at 497. In the same 8 hours, America built as many. The war moved on without them. The machines that had once symbolized national pride were now footnotes in ledgers of tonnage and output. Yamamoto's final memorandum closed with a single line: "We successfully copied their engineering. We could not copy their factories." Those words traveled farther than any truck, past defeat, past surrender, into the workshops of a rebuilding nation. 5 years later, when the guns were cold and occupation banners fluttered over Tokyo, the lessons of the AK-10 began to breathe again. American advisors asked for 100 light vehicles for Japan's new police reserve. Toyota answered with the BJ prototype. Stronger, simpler, wiser. By 1954, it bore a new name, Land Cruiser, the same geometry, the same faith in simplicity, but now powered by peace instead of pride. In a quiet ceremony, Hanji Umehara watched the first production Land Cruiser drive out of the yard. He touched his hat brim and murmured, "At last, a tool." The camera lingers on the road stretching beyond the gates, sunlight glinting off steel once forged for war, now built for endurance. The Jeep Bantam BRC-40 was not just a vehicle, it was a philosophy made of steel and reason. The Toyota AK-10 was not just a failure, it was a lesson paid in courage and humility. War revealed what engineering alone could not, that genius means nothing without the power to sustain it, and that industry, not ideology, decides who endures. Every bolt, every wrench turn, every sleepless night in those factories told the same story. Precision alone cannot win a war. Only production can. If you believe courage and ingenuity still matter, stay with us. Help keep these true World War II stories alive. One machine, one mission at a time.